Hey, Ilizwi Moja Africa family. So, welcome to episode 21 of our podcast. In our previous episode, we were delighted to have Jadmia join us to talk about her experience working with special needs children and her passion for igniting young minds through education. So, today we turn our attention to another important issue that will shape the future of Africa's youth, the environment. This year is particularly significant. On June 16th, 2026, South Africa commemorates the 50th anniversary of the 1976 Soweto uprising under the theme Reset at 50, The Future Calls. As we honor the courage and determination of the young people who fought for a better future, we are reminded that every generation faces its own defining challenge. For today's generation, one of those challenges is protecting our environment.
Between May and June, the world and the African continent have commemorated several important environmental observances, including International Biodiversity Day, World Environment Day, and Africa Day, to name a few. Together, these commemorations have highlighted a common message. The future of Africa depends on how we protect our natural resources, safeguard biodiversity, secure water resources, and respond to climate change. So before we dive into this important conversation, be sure to follow us on X at Ilizwi Moja, Facebook at Ilizwi Moja, as well as our TikTok at Ilizwi Moja Africa. Like, subscribe, and click the notification bell on our YouTube channel so that you never miss an episode.
Great. So I am your host for today, guys, Lindile Mthembu, an academic and political enthusiast, passionate about humanitarian issues, joined by my co-host Heri Mimi, who is the founder of Lorena Shuja Africa, a movement dedicated to awakening leaders to clarity, aligning them to purpose, and empowering them to arise in courage, as well as Zinile Zinisa, a gender and youth advocate who promotes inclusive rights-based approaches in biodiversity conservation. Okay, guys, so today I'm so honored because this is my dear friend. We are welcoming Wandile Sangweni as our guest for this episode. So, Wandile is an admitted attorney of the High Court of the Republic of South Africa. Although her current areas of practice are constitutional law, property law, and administrative and law, municipal law, Wandile has always had a keen interest in the environment we live in, environmental law, and how Africans can protect the environment and enforce the environmental rights to a clean, healthy, and safe environment through conservation, advocacy for sustainable development, and both national and international law. She believes that it is the duty of the current youth of the world to fight for climate justice and the protection of our global environment for the benefit of not only the current youth, but future generations. So thank you so much, Wendy, for joining us for today.
Thank you for having me, ladies. Thank you for this opportunity.
Love it, love it. So, 50 years after the youth of 1976 demanded a better future, we asked, have we made meaningful progress in protecting the environment for the next generation? And are young people today playing a meaningful role in shaping environmental decisions and driving positive change? So let's begin exploring the connection between youth activism of the past and the activism of today. So, Wendy, as South Africa commemorates the 50th anniversary of the Soweto uprising, which is actually so beyond and it's amazing, what parallels do you see between youth activism of 1976 and the environmental advocacy movements led by young people today?
Well, for me, I think there are very clear parallels between, the youth of 1976 who fought against the apartheid regime and
Mm,
the youth, environmental movements that are driving change today. So both generations demonstrate how systematic exclusion can spark radical youth-led action in the pursuit of justice, dignity, and basically a better systematic and economic and even environment for a better future, right?
mm,
The youth of 1976 were fighting for survival. They mobilized against the Bantu education system and, the forced imposition of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction because they understood that inferior education would limit their opportunities and condemn future generations to continued oppression and economic exclusion. So their struggle was never only about themselves, it was about securing a better future for those who also come after them, right? Similarly to today's youth, environmental activists, they are fighting for far more than just their own interests, or rather the interests of the current generation. They are advocating for the rights of future generations as well to inherit a world that is healthy, safe, sustainable, and capable of supporting human development. Their fight is not just about the youth today, it's also about the youth tomorrow. It's always been about more than just us now. It's about us now and those who are going to come after us. So one of the other important parallels for me is resistance. So we have so many policies today, with its environmental policy, this climate change policy, that are both national policies and international policies as well. But some of them don't include meaningful participation of the youth, or even just communities in general, whether it be in urban areas or rural areas. So that resistance against policies that are just imposed upon people, you see it in 1976 with the students who resisted an education system that was designed and imposed upon them without their consent, and that was against their interests. Similarly, today, the youth, of Africa, the world, are basically challenging decisions that expose their communities to pollution, environmental degradation, and harmful impacts of climate change. So these initiatives, such as equality campaigns, climate justice movements, conservation projects by young people,
yes,
they show that young people are refusing to accept a future that will disadvantage them and disadvantage those who come after them. So for me, both movements demonstrate, a power of solidarity as well, that youth all over the world are fighting for their rights. We are banding together in every country that we are in to fight for our rights, our environmental rights, to, basically live in an environment that won't be affected by the decisions of people who don't understand what it means to live in it. And it also shows that activism is intergenerational, in the sense that I don't believe that, if we didn't grow up seeing and hearing the stories of activism by the youth of 1976, that we would have not become youth activists ourselves. So essentially what I'm trying to say is we are influenced by them. It's just the context is different. So ultimately, the parallels between 1976 and today's environmental advocacy, they reveal that the fight for the rights of African youth is a cross-generational struggle, firstly. And that while they fought for political freedom, dignity, and opportunity, we are also fighting for, you could say similar things, in the sense that, environment can affect, freedom, dignity, and opportunity as well. But we are also fighting for us to enjoy those freedoms in a world that remains healthy, that remains sustainable. Both generations understand a fundamental truth, which is that meaningful change requires young people to stand up for themselves, and fight for their future. So that's the parallels that I see.
And I love that. And just something that you highlighted, which is so important, is that there's this intergenerational activism that you've highlighted, that it just gets passed down to an extent, right? Where you're seeing the initiatives and the impacts that the youth of 1976 made, and how that gets passed down to us, right? And I really love that you highlighted that aspect, that it is very much intergenerational, and also it's very much future driven, that you've also mentioned that both groups of youth in 1976 were future driven. They thought about what was the impact that they wanted to make, and to ensure that the next generation has better opportunities. And likewise, with our youth now, they're thinking about what kind of environment would we want the future generation to, to gain, right? A healthy environment, as you mentioned, nicely so, and a sustainable environment. So yeah, thank you so much for that, for those points.
If I may just jump in, wanted to make an observation between the activism in the 1970s versus the activism right now. So in the 1970s, it was youth on the street, right? It was them marching, it's them putting their life on the line. And right now, it's not to say that the youth are not necessarily putting their lives on the line, but with the advent of social media, there's a lot of keyboard warriors, so now there's social, and not to make light of the keyboard warriors, but I'm in the comfort of my house. This thing it's pinching me. Like, well, let's save the environment. So there's a lot of social media activism, which is awesome. Because and then the thing is also there's a lot of interconnectivity because
Yeah.
before the whole world knew what was happening in South Africa in 1976. How much media coverage did it get? Now we know exactly what happened because we have all the videos, the footage, we're watching it in hindsight. But right now,
Yeah.
when there's activism, advocacy, it is in real time. Like right now, if something is happening in, I don't know, Yugoslavia, some Latvia, Liechtenstein, like some remote country, I will see it on my phone. If somebody's, and we're able to see that this struggle is global. Sometimes you can feel like that it is you in your context, it's you in your country. Turns out it's everywhere. So I feel now the advocacy right now, it's more interconnected because of the internet. And and there's now a rise in social activism on the internet, on like the keyboard warriors, as I was saying. Not to say that the people actually still march on the streets, but there's now also an increase in from the comfort of my house. I'm going to make a poster and I'm going to make a lot of noise on Twitter. Kenyans, we are very famous on Twitter. So we're very good at that. So I think that's like a tool that it's just how activism has evolved from the case in Soweto, South Africa in 1976 versus 50 years later. From the comfort of my bed, I am going to be this activist, and I'll still make a difference. Yeah.
I think it's also very telling in the sense that, it shows that the youth use the means that they have available to them at that time, and whether we are in the streets or we are on our phone, we will fight for what we believe is right for us and those who are going to come after us. So I really like that point on, keyboard warriors. It's very nice.
Yeah, and I love that you also highlighted that, Harry, and thank you for mentioning that point that technology plays such a huge role in how activism is, portrayed today, and the use of technology it's how it's important, using it to ensure that we able to reach a lot of people and that a lot of people make noise and hear about what's going on. So yeah, I fully agree with you, ladies, and thank you so much for your response. So I want to actually dive into the second question, which basically both of you have highlighted some aspects of the second question. But in the recent weeks, we have commemorated Biodiversity Day, Africa Day, and the World Environment Day, all highlighting the importance of protecting our natural resources for sustainability. So looking back over the past few years, have we, as the African nation, have we made meaningful progress in safeguarding the environment for future generations?
You know, this question, I actually really love this question because I recently watched a video basically by David Attenborough, and they were talking about how they were able to basically revive a population of chimpanzees or gorillas, I believe, in the Congo that were almost extinct, and it took not just the youth, but the whole community. So I love the question because it made me think of, of that. But just to get to the point, I think there has been some meaningful progress, you know. I would say that the issue would be, you know, implementation. So, in my opinion, basically, we've moved, you know, beyond just simply discussing environmental protection as Africa right now. And I think that we have also then moved from just discussing that to implementing, you know, environmental legal policies and, you know, in institutional frameworks to support the what we have discussed. So I would say that we have moved towards it, but I think that the progress is not sufficient enough because climate change continues to intensify. You know, biodiversities are declining at alarming rates. There's water scarcity issues. So I believe that there's more that we can do in Africa to protect ourselves, especially because we are the continent that, you know, contributes the least towards climate change. So I just think that there's more that can be done, basically. That's my point.
I want to jump in and say yes and no. So, I was just teaching this unit in I teach in a tertiary institution. So I was teaching this unit on the agricultural history of Kenya. I was so surprised to find out that pre-colonial Kenya, pre-colonial Africa was ecologically conscious. Was biodiversity was top notch. Like we had our own methods of ensuring that the soil is not depleted of its nutrients, whether it's crop rotation, it's leaving the land fallow. We had our way of dealing with soil erosion. We had our way of, you know, even intercropping. Like we had traditional methods of preserving the environment. Even trees, the like traditional, like the elders, they knew don't cut these certain trees because they're good for water catchment, or if you cut this, make sure you plant this. Like we were so environmentally conscious. And then colonization happened, and then it became okay, capitalism and cash crops, and let's just make the most of this land, and we don't care whether the nutrients are being depleted or not because it's not our land after all. And now, so now I think Kenya, we got independence in 1963. So what? It's like 60 years down the line. Yeah. Now 60 years down the line, now suddenly we're being told that we need to be environmentally conscious. We already were, you know, so I don't know. I kind of like, yes, we need to do more, but more is not necessarily adapting strategies from the West. More might be, what did our forefathers do? Even just listening to my grandmother, or even listening to my uncle. I was driving, I was with him in the car, and we were driving headed towards the village where he grew up, and he was just telling me, like, oh, you know, when I was a boy, my grandfather told me that in this forest we only cut this tree, and when we cut this tree, we plant this. Like he was telling me about environmental conservation. He was being taught by his grandfather in the 40s, or because he was born in the 40s, so like in the 50s and the 60s. So yes, we can do more, but I'm not always pro doing the more what the West wants. Why can't we do more by going back to whatever our, you know, what was our, however, how are we doing agriculture as Africans? Let's just go back to that because we were already environmentally conscious. And we were still cooking with charcoal, you know, this, you know, because for all of the noise about this carbon footprint and whatever, the reality is Africa has the least carbon footprint. The West is the one who is jetting around in, you know, jets and whatever, and using all these planes and whatever. So, and it's rather unfortunate that we are, I mean, charcoal is one of the things that is going to help us build our economy. You can't take that away. Yes, we should find other fuels that might be more environmentally conscious, and we are. You know, whether it's using cow manure or whatever, and you know, those things to biodiversity, you know, fuel and all that. But we should make progress, but it doesn't only have to be Western influence. Let's go back to whatever agricultural practices our ancestors were doing. Then this continent will be fine. That is just my 2 cents.
Mm, mm. And I really just, based on both of your points, ladies, that I find and agreeing with Wandile there that we, as the African continent, we've contributed less in terms of the carbon footprints, and in like we have not been as how to say it, problematic as other nations like, your Asia, your the Americas and so forth. So that's been more of an issue predominantly from those particular areas. But with us, we've contributed the less, and yet there is a need, which we do have, to ensure that we ensure a sustainable environment. And Wandile pointed out very nicely that we have had policies implemented, and we've had various aspects that are provided, but they're still more in concern with the implementation process, in concern with the need for people to be engaging in these particular issues and matters. And that could also because of perhaps resources like as you mentioned rightfully so, Harry, that we do depend on charcoal and these particular natural resources that are problematic to the environment, and finding a way to steer away from that and going back to what you mentioned here, which I've also read about. And you're very right that before pre-colonial Africa, we've had mechanisms in place to ensure that we have a sustainable environment and a protected environment. And then colonization took over. And so going back to those particular strategies is very important. And introducing those methods of what our ancestors used to do is a very important, yeah, a very important point that you mentioned there, Harry. So yeah, ladies. Oh, Wendela, you wanted to say something?
Um, so just to, you know, piggyback off Harry's point, I like the term, environmental consciousness, because for me, environmental consciousness, especially as an attorney, um, is basically how do we make laws that protect our environment, and then how do we implement those laws? And what is the difference between making the law and implementation? And basically what is the implementation issue, right? And I think environmental consciousness also comes basically from the point of we can try and implement what our ancestors did to try and you know protect our environment, conserve it and everything. However, we live in a very globalized world where we have oil companies in the middle of Africa, destroying people's environments. Now, how do we protect the people of those communities? How do we stop that constant, destruction by oil companies and, data centers and all of that, while at the same time trying to go back, into implementing things that our ancestors passed down to us to help us, protect our environment through, sustainable farming and so forth. So I think for me, because I am an attorney, the thing for me is we focus very much on environmental law because we believe that environmental law, like having stronger laws, creates greater awareness. It also assists in holding people who are destroying our environment accountable. So I think environmental consciousness, which we can term as also something that the youth of Africa very much have, is just rooted in the law. And that's why a lot of young people today are focusing on environmental law as a way of being active and, as a way of promoting climate advocacy.
Mm, I like that. I like that you spoke about young people are focusing on environmental law. They're looking at policies and they're going to governments and going to institutions and saying that, based off of these laws, based off of these policies, um, certain things need to be implemented. We need to ensure that we engage with the laws and, put it to pass. And so, yeah, it's actually goes into the next question concerning that, young people are often amongst those affected by climate change, water scarcity, and environmental degradation. Yeah. So in your view, are their concerns being adequately reflected in these policies, in these environmental policies, the financial mechanisms, and decision-making processes?
I would say no. I would say
Mm,
no because, firstly, just inviting young people, you know, to just speak at these forums doesn't mean that their concerns and, their ideas are being, basically taken into account when decisions are being made. So I don't think that today's, policies, environmental policies, financial mechanism, decision-making processes actually reflect, what the youth have to say, their concerns, their standpoint. I think that too often young people are just treated as an interest group to be consulted rather than essential stakeholders, whose futures are directly affected by the decisions that are being made by governments and international institutions. I think if there were if there was more inclusion of young people, even in spaces where the decisions are being made. Instead of just having them at these international forums, actually bring young people into the rooms where these decisions are being made, the rooms where, the political decisions and the political and economic decisions are being made in relation to the environment, then we could have a stronger influence, and then our concerns would be reflected more broadly. But right now, I don't think so.
I
mm,
have to agree with you, Wendy, on that. I don't think the youth are necessarily represented as far as the making of environmental policies or financial mechanisms or the decision-making process. And I feel that's why now there is a lot of keyboard warrioring. That's why there's a lot of activism on social media, because if you're not going to hear me in parliament, then you will hear me on some platform. And
mm,
right now, the social media space is even more powerful than our legislative space. So because it has a lot of sway, there's a lot of, you can garner international pressure. And also I find now it's causing youth to kind of do something drastic, do something that's going to make a statement. For example, last year in Kenya, we had this 22-year-old girl. She's called Trifena Mudhoni, and she's an environmentalist and also a mental health survivor, according to how she describes herself. And she went on a 72 tree hugging marathon to create awareness about environmental challenges in Kenya and the world. And previously, she went for a 48 hour tree hugging marathon. So this 72-hour marathon kind of broke her previous record. She went into the Guinness Book of Records for it. But here's the thing. It caused people to ask, why are you hugging a tree? What's the issue with the environment? And guess what? It got her it got her invited into the State House, where she had a one-on-one with our president. So I'm sure when she was there having a one-on-one with the president, she presented whatever environmental issue she thought is important, whatever she is fighting for, whatever she wants her voice heard. It was heard now by the president, but those are extremes. So I'm
mm.
finding, because the youth are not getting the platform, or even if you are called for these dialogue meetings, you have no guarantee that whatever you discuss there is going to actually reflect on a national scale, then I'm going to go on, then that's why there's a lot of activism on the social media, because then you can put a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And for sure, there's a lot of pressure on the social media. 2 years ago, in Kenya, we had the whole Gen Z protest because of the financial bill. And yeah, social media pressure made the president actually join one of the X spaces and dialogue with the youth one-on-one, because of the pressure that was created through social media. They eventually went to the streets, but it was social media that started it all. So I think now those are the outlets, because the youth are feeling that they're not represented, they're not being heard. then now we're doing these extremes. I'm going to hug a tree for 72 hours, or I'm going to go, we're going to do this social media campaign. I think that's how the youth are responding to not having the space to have their views aired, their thoughts put into legislation. That's my take.
And I really like that because, it just shows how, like as Wandile mentioned, with the policies and how the youth are not being represented in those particular policies. And you touched, Harry, on social media and how social media is used as an outlet for the youth to showcase their, grievances and to also create public awareness so that governments can be involved, so that governments can, essentially wake up and see what's going on. And so that aspect is very important in activism is, engaging with governments, engaging with officials, and how do we engage them? And so it's using social media as that aspect to engage them and to make them, be aware of what's going on. And it actually then also leans into the fourth question, which you've actually answered, Harry, on, you know, sharing like a certain example that resonates with you in concern with youth advocacy. So we know that, youth engagements in climate change, marine conservation, environmental justice movements across the globe and across Africa. So we know that there's various kinds of those engagements. And Harry, you pointed out the example of, that young girl who's, 22 years old and was going through a whole, frenzy of hugging trees and to show that we need to protect the environment. I'm not sure, Wandile, if you have perhaps an example that resonates with you where youth advocacy has successfully influenced environmental outcomes or policy change.
Yeah, so for me, the example that I have is the Shell Wild Coast litigation. I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
know that one. So basically, Shell wanted to conduct extensive, seismic surveys off of South Africa's, sensitive wild coast, in search of potential oil and gas reserves, right? So basically what happened was youth-led organizations, environmental advocates, traditional communities challenged the approvals that were granted by the South African government, for Shell to conduct these seismic surveys. And they basically argued that the blasting of high intensity sound waves through the ocean threatened marine life, local livelihoods, and also basically deep cultural and spiritual relationships that the communities have with the sea. And this stood out for me because, like Henry said, it was on social media. Majority of the advocacy was and the fight, against the permission for Shell to conduct these surveys was done on social media. It was all over the news. It was all over Facebook. It was all over Twitter, Instagram, you name it. And one day you're just scrolling through Instagram and it pops up and you just say, what is this? Next thing you know, you find yourself resharing the post or even doing your own post. And that was one of the, one of the youth advocacy, movements that actually resonated with me and stood out. And also resonated with me and stood out because they took the government and Shell to court. So you find young people taking one of the world's biggest oil companies to court, and even the Republic of South Africa, they took both of them to court and they won. They won, guys. And the courts literally said to them that you need to consult with your communities. They literally said, and I quote, they found that consultations are not just a box ticking exercise. So communities must be genuinely informed and given real opportunity to participate in decisions that affect their lives. So they also recognize that, just publishing notices and telling the community that, hey, we want to do this is not enough. There must be meaningful consultation with communities. So these are young people who took a big corporation to court to fight for their environment, to fight for their communities, to fight for the livelihoods of their people. And that's why that case, resonates with me. I think it provides a beautiful blueprint, for young people across the continent, who want to fight for their environment, but not just in the streets, not just on social media, but also in the courtrooms, and also to take it from the ground and just blast it everywhere and make sure that they get what they want, which is a healthier, safer environment. So that's why it resonated with me.
Mm, mm. And I absolutely love that example, just how successful it was, because as you mentioned, they won that case, and it indicates how mobilization and it indicates how the youth are driven, right? They're driven to ensure that the governments and corporations take responsibility for what's going on in the environment. And yeah, and it's very important that we address that. And so, yeah, ladies, the Youth Day theme this year is Reset at 50. The future calls. If we were to reset our approach to environmental protection and youth inclusion, what should governments, institutions, and communities do differently to ensure a more sustainable future for the next generation? So this is actually so important. How are we going to ensure that we reset, right?
I believe, for me, it would be a move from just basically allowing the youth to participate in discussions to more of seeing the youth as equal partners in protecting our environment and in shaping environmental and developmental policies. So basically moving rather from consulting the youth to having them also participate in decision making, and just also for the governments of Africa to create meaningful opportunities for youth participation. And yeah, I also think that communities, I think it's very, very much also in African communities, we see a situation where the youth will forever be considered as those who don't know enough, or those who, what you call this, must listen to their elders. But I think Harry pointed it out, that there needs to be almost like a fostering of cross collaboration between generations, where
Mm,
traditional ecological knowledge should be combined with modern environmental science to develop sustainable solutions for for local challenges. Schools should be able to teach environmental education, skills development, resilience programs in relation to the environment to the youth, but also that the elders can pass down that knowledge to the youth. So I think for me, that is a way of ensuring a more suitable future for the next generation, and how governments, institutions, and communities can work together to do that.
no, I love that. So it's mobilization, the youth coming to the table, being involved in discussions, and as you mentioned, Wandile, the intergenerational aspects where we're passing down knowledge, right? And sharing knowledge as well, which will help to ensure a sustainable future. Yes, that's perfect. Yeah. Um, I think this actually then leads us to our last question, ladies, and this is so exciting, and I love this engagement. I love this discussion and just how you ladies are able to, provide such great points and, advice even of how we can be able to change the way that we go about, protecting our environment. So how do we encourage and promote environmental activism within African youth?
Think, Slee, you know me. I believe that education is the is the starting point for a majority of the
Yes.
movements in the world. I think education, it must be relevant and accessible. You understand? So young people need to understand how environmental issues directly affect them, their health, their livelihood, their future opportunities. So,
Hmm.
and it also requires us, to localize environmental education. So we translate environmental knowledge into indigenous languages such as Swahili, Xhosa, Zulu, and then we also use creative platforms, such as poetry and theater to make environmental issues more relatable. I understand very well that knowledge is not enough. I think as somebody who studied law, sometimes you are limited. Very much, you see everything from a legal standpoint instead of an environmental and agricultural standpoint. So, I think that knowledge is not enough. It's also that you know activism also has to be seen through the social economic standpoint. So how do we teach people to also preserve their own environment for their own future economic standing? And I just want to say another thing for me is that how do we encourage people? We need to understand that environmental justice and social justice are inseparable. There's a reason why South Africa has the right to environment in Section 24 of its constitution. You understand? You cannot separate our environment from all the other rights that we have, and also
Exactly.
the promotion of all these other rights, because with the right to environment comes the right to health. With the right to environment comes the right to also be able to exploit your own environment in a manner that is sustainable for your own economic right. So I think that young people, we need to try our best to understand that it will be education, it will be understanding what we can do to promote our own economic growth, but while promoting our environmental rights. So yeah, I think it's multifaceted, it's all intersecting. Yeah.
Mm.
I'd like to add something to that. Yeah, you're right. It's all intersecting, and I just wanted to add that I would encourage the African youth to just remember that they're brilliant. One, the African youth is brilliant, is creative, is innovative, is fearless, is a problem solver, solution finder, and
Mm.
sometimes I think that is lost in it just falls through the cracks, that fact, who the African youth is today. On top of that, they're social media conscious. I mean, technology is at the fingertips. I mean, what the youth right now can do is amazing. No other generation has been able to do it. I guess Gen Alpha will top them, but right now the youth are just amazing. So just to, I think as far as activism is concerned, just to help everyone understand that activism is for like the environmental consciousness, or activism is for everyone. It's not for the person who's taking the corporation to court. It's not only for the person who's hugging a tree. It's not only for the person who's marching on the streets. Everyone, whatever field they are in, whatever level they're in, can still participate in helping to ensure that the environment is a better place. Whether it is you, the creative, the way you were talking about, if you're creative. If you're a creative, then you can write songs about it, poetry, books. If you're in a church setup, you can do a sermon on it. You can teach the Sunday school kids, like whatever. If you're in the space, the law space, as you are, Wandile, then it's about interpreting the law for us to understand it,
Mm.
taking these corporations to court. If you're maybe in the village, then it is practicing crop rotation. As simple as that. You are playing your part in environmental conservation and activism. Or maybe you're the keyboard warrior, then do that on social media, and create pressure, and garner international attention. So the African youth, because it's easy to look at activism only through one lens. It's the people on the street, it's the people on social media, it's the people who've taken the corporation to court. No, it's all of us. It is me who
Yeah.
plants it. It's me who, teaches my children or my younger sister, hey, we don't do this. We don't do this. This is how we farm. This is how we what. It's all of us, like everyone has a collective responsibility. So whatever your gifting is, whatever level you are, whatever your specialty is, whatever your interest is, because also some people will be like, yeah, I'm not really an environmentalist. Like honestly, that's not the hill I'm about to die on, you know? It's like
Mm,
environmental activism is not the hill I'm about to die on. But that doesn't mean I'm not environmentally conscious. So even if
mm,
I might not be an activist, what can I do at my level? What can I do in my sphere of influence? So I think that's something that we can maybe just help the African youth see with all your creativity, all your fearlessness. You, whether you're an activist or not, the environment is ours. Whether I'm an activist or not, if this environment is destroyed, it will affect me. So just everyone to understand that everyone has a role to play, big or small.
True, very true.
mm. Yeah, I love that. It's very important, ladies, because I think what is so interesting is from both of your points that the aspect of everyone has a role to play and the importance of education as well, understanding the need of why we need to engage in activism and protecting the environment and ensuring sustainable future, and as well as what we can play in our current position. As you mentioned, rightfully so, Harry, as me as you know, um, the teacher, what can I play in my current position to ensure that people are aware of the environment? And in whatever your position is, you can play a role in, ensuring that there's a sense of activism, the sense of understanding that we need to protect the environment. So whether big or small, there's different roles that we can all play, and that should be an encouragement to the audience as well. And so thank you so much, ladies, for really engaging with this topic and ensuring that the audience understands the importance of protecting the environment. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to close us off with a riddle or two. So we're gonna get into some riddles, which is very exciting. And so yeah, ladies, I hope you are up for it. And I hope that, yeah, that we're able to answer these fascinating riddles. So I'm going to read out a riddle, and so you're going to let me know what it is. A hint, these riddles are all environmentally motivated, basically. So it has to do about the environment. So I build no house, yet shelter all. I stand in silence, proud and tall. I drink the rain, I eat the sun. I give you air, your life's begun. What am I?
A tree.
Yes. Yes, there he is. That is so true. It is indeed a tree, ladies. I am a tree. Okay, so the next one. I run, but never walk. I murmur, but never talk. I touch your skin, yet slip away. Without me, dust will stay. What am I? You will let me know if you want me to repeat it again.
Yeah, could you say one more time?
Okay, sure thing. I run, but never walk. I murmur, but never talk. I touch your skin, yet slip away. Without me, dust will stay. What am I?
The wind.
A great, what's this? Yeah, a great attempt there. Great attempt, but not the wind.
Is it water?
You very close. Very, very
A
close. Yes, it
river?
does includes. Wait, sorry, is
Is
it?
it a river or rain?
Yes, a river. That is the one. That is the
Oh,
one.
wow.
So I think I'll stop there. I'll stop there with the riddles. But yeah,
Oh,
lady.
I ran, but never walk. Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Nice one.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a tricky one, but it's very nice, very nice. So, thank you so much, ladies, and yeah, thank you for joining us in this discussion, everyone, and for our exceptional leader, Wandile, for sharing her passion and the importance of environmental activism among the youth in Africa. So you can follow Wandile on LinkedIn as Wandile Sangweni. Her LinkedIn address is in the description box. Don't forget to also follow IMA and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We can't wait to engage with you all on our socials as we keep you up to date with upcoming episodes. Chat soon, everyone.